The arrival of fall always stirred a sense of nostalgia within me. As the leaves turned to shades of red and gold and the air grew crisp and fragrant, I was reminded of my childhood, of apple-picking adventures and cozy evenings by the fire. But that year, as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, something sinister began to unfold in the sleepy town of Briarwood. It all started with the inexplicable disappearance of my neighbor, Mrs. Turner. She had lived in the small house next to mine for as long as I could remember, a kind and elderly woman who had a story for every season. She had a particular fondness for autumn, often reminiscing about the days when she and her late husband would go on long walks, hand in hand, among the falling leaves. One chilly October morning, I noticed her garden was untouched, the vibrant colors of her carefully tended flowers fading into the muted palette of autumn. The scene was uncharacteristic of her. Mrs. Turner was known for her meticulous gardening, even in the chill of fall. I knocked on her door, but there was no answer. Concerned, I called the police, and together we entered her house. The interior was eerily quiet, and a musty scent hung in the air. It was as if time had stopped within those walls. The rooms were filled with relics of her past, framed photographs of her husband and faded love letters. But there was no sign of Mrs. Turner. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. The police searched the entire town and beyond, but Mrs. Turner remained missing, leaving us all bewildered. Her sudden disappearance was unsettling, and it cast a shadow over our picturesque town, shrouding it in a sense of foreboding. The town's sense of unease deepened as more strange events unfolded. The local school reported a series of bizarre occurrences. Children claimed to see shadowy figures lurking in the corners of the playground, and the teachers found unexplainable scratches on the chalkboard each morning. The town's pastor even mentioned a disturbing dream he had one night, where he heard ghostly whispers in the church. It was the fall festival that solidified our fears. Held annually in the town square, the festival was a beloved tradition, a celebration of the harvest season. But that year, as the townspeople gathered, a chilling silence descended upon the square. The usual laughter and music were absent, replaced by a heavy, unsettling stillness. I noticed it first when I saw Mrs. Turner's empty garden. The flowers that had once flourished with color had withered and died overnight. The other gardens in the square shared the same fate, and the town's pumpkin patch was a sea of rotting, decaying pumpkins. Children ran in terror, crying out about the pale-faced figures they had seen among the trees. Some claimed the figures had reached out to them, whispering words they couldn't understand. Panic swept through the crowd, and people rushed to their homes, abandoning the festival. The town was in an uproar, with fear and suspicion spreading like wildfire. Some believed it was a prank, while others whispered of supernatural forces at play. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as I returned home, the image of the dying gardens and the pale-faced figures haunting my thoughts. The following weeks were a blur of strange occurrences. My sleep was plagued by nightmares of faceless specters, and I could hear faint whispers on the wind, calling my name. I kept my doors locked and my windows shut, but the sense of dread that enveloped the town was inescapable. One evening, as I sat in my living room, trying to find solace in the crackling fire, I heard a knock at the door. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. When I opened the door, I was met with a chilling sight. A group of townspeople, their faces ashen with fear, stood on my doorstep. They spoke of encounters with the pale-faced figures, claiming that the apparitions had begun to appear in their homes. They were desperate for answers, for any solution to end the nightmare that had taken hold of our town. We formed a makeshift group determined to uncover the truth behind the fall season's disturbing events. Armed with flashlights and a shared sense of dread, we set out to explore the forest that surrounded Briarwood. It was in those dark woods that we hoped to find the source of the eerie apparitions. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the trees closed in around us, and the air grew colder. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves beneath our feet and the whispering of the wind. The pale moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. Hours passed, and the sense of unease grew. It was as though the forest itself was watching us, as though it held secrets that it had no intention of revealing. We stumbled upon an old, weathered tree, its bark twisted and gnarled. At its base, we found an inscription that sent a shiver down our spines. "Awaken the spirits," it read, and beneath it was a carving of a pale-faced figure. The discovery sent shockwaves through our group. We realized that the apparitions were somehow connected to the forest and the rituals of the past. But what did it all mean, and how could we put an end to the haunting? The answer came unexpectedly when one of our group members noticed a small, faded book buried in the leaves at the base of the tree. It was a journal belonging to Mrs. Turner. The pages were filled with her words, recounting her memories of the forest and the apparitions. In her final entry, she wrote about a ritual, one that was meant to awaken the spirits of the forest. She had been desperate to see her husband again, to feel his presence among the trees. She had called upon the spirits, unwittingly inviting them into the town. We knew we had to reverse the ritual, to put an end to the haunting that had gripped Briarwood. Armed with the knowledge from Mrs. Turner's journal, we returned to the town, determined to perform the necessary steps. The air was heavy with tension as we gathered in the town square, the pale moon casting an eerie glow on the withered gardens. With a sense of trepidation, we began the ritual, following the instructions from the journal. The words we spoke were ancient and strange, and the wind seemed to carry our voices into the forest. As we chanted, a gust of wind swept through the square, carrying with it the sound of whispers. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, and the pale-faced figures began to materialize among the trees. They reached out to us, their ghostly hands stretching toward the square. We continued the ritual, undeterred by the apparitions. The air crackled with energy and a sense of anticipation filled the square. As we reached the final incantation, a blinding light burst from the ground, illuminating the entire square. The pale-faced figures let out an otherworldly wail, and with a rush of wind they were pulled back into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. The night grew quiet, and the stillness that followed was palpable. We had done it. The haunting was over, and the town of Briarwood was free from the grip of the pale-faced apparitions. As the first light of dawn broke, the gardens in the square began to flourish once more, their colors returning with vibrant intensity. The townspeople began to return to their homes, their faces filled with relief and gratitude. We had banished the apparitions and put an end to the haunting that had plagued our town. It was a moment of triumph, but it came at a cost. Mrs. Turner's journal revealed that the spirits were bound to the forest, and to break the curse, someone had to take her place as a guardian of the woods. It was a heavy burden to bear, but I knew it had to be done. I stepped forward, accepting the responsibility of watching over the forest and ensuring that the ritual would never be repeated. As the years passed, I became the guardian of the forest, preserving its secrets and protecting the town of Briarwood. The autumn season returned to its former beauty, and the haunting was but a distant memory. The town's gardens flourished, and the children once again played in the square without fear. The fall season brought with it a sense of nostalgia, of crisp air and vibrant colors, and the town of Briarwood thrived once more. But I knew that the spirits of the forest would forever remain a part of my life, a reminder of the price that had been paid to protect our town. The memories of that fateful fall season would never fade, and the eerie apparitions that had haunted our town would remain etched in my mind, a testament to the power of the unknown in the midst of the familiar.